Hi, welcome back to part 3 of the interview with Mr. Harrison Kern. He has a lot of interesting things to say that's relevant to both the city of Milwaukee and cities across the country. We will hope that more people will get involved in the decision making of this country, but we have a lot of people, actually too many people, sitting on the sidelines. So let's continue with part 3.
A system, be it corrupt or a system being correct, is designed to maintain the reason for its existence. So if you have a community or a country that is designed by people who don't look like you, that has been developed in such a way that the advantages are given to people who don't look like you, the only way you're going to change that system is to get involved in it and put a wrench in the system, because if you don't, the system is going to continue to support itself. Any system.
Yes.
You know? And so that is something that we have to, if we think that 400 years from now, the system is going to wake up with a conscience and all of a sudden go, hey, we ought to sing Kumbaya and let's do everything right. It's naive and it's ignorant. It's not going to happen.
Because one of the things that, what would change the system are the people getting involved in the system. If people are expecting an immediate change, or if immediate change happens, it's because someone took an immediate stance and got immediate responses from it. But if it takes a long time, it's because people are slowly working the system as much as they can. But if you want immediate impact, immediate change, like I said, if you get 50,000, 60,000 people to show up at a poll and vote for one person,
Absolutely.
believe me, that person is going to be the next, whether that be the alderman, whether that person be the next mayor.
Absolutely.
If you get 60,000 people to show up and believe in a specific cause, that will change something immediately. But if, it takes time, this person's losing voters over time. After 4 years, you lose a couple thousand. The next couple of years, you lose a couple thousand. That's what draws out this process.
Absolutely.
So that's important for people to understand.
And we were speaking earlier, even about the situation with the new parking booths and the things they want to put on the windshields of the cars. One of our elected officials, a very popular one, and a very pro-ethnic one, decided that whole approval is something that's going to target the black community. And I find that somewhat offensive, because that's like to say that everyone that parks wrong is black, or everyone that parks wrong is poor. Right? People who park wrong are people who just don't follow the rules, whether they're black, white, green, old, or young. You don't get a parking ticket because you're black. You don't get a parking ticket because you're white. You don't get a parking ticket because you're gay, or male or female, or old or young. You get a parking ticket based on what a sign says that you either did read or pay attention to or not, or a procedure that is in place that you should or should have known is in place. And if it's done in error, you have an opportunity to address that and to make it right if necessary by following the court procedures or whatever is in place to do that. Mm-hmm. So the notion, first and foremost, that a policy involving booting these cars is something that's going to adversely affect poor people, low-income people, quite frankly, it's being disingenuous. And I think it's a farce, just because, again, it doesn't target people based on color. It targets people based on not following a rule. And if that, unfortunately, happens to be more young people than old people, that's just what it is. If it happens to be more black people than white people, it is what it is. But
what about the argument about, well, they don't have, further out from the central city or the city, people got driveways and things like that. But in the city, they don't have driveways.
Well, I find that, again, a relatively bogus argument. If you go on the east side, and on the far east side, the closer you get to the lake, the lack of parking is probably greater than any other place in the city of Milwaukee. It's also proportionally higher in terms of white citizens and non-black citizens. Mm-hmm. And you don't have the same parking situations. You have people parking on the right side of the street. People have permits, by far and large, more so than they do in other places. So is that a racial thing or not? The fact, when you come into the inner city and you come into some parts of the city where they say we don't have garages or driveways, well, at one point in time they all did. Mm-hmm. Who knocked them down? Who knocked the garages down? Who tore up the, and again, did somebody just come in and bulldoze the garage and take it away because you live there? Mm-hmm. So again, is that something that we are at least involved in helping create, good, bad, or otherwise. Every neighborhood that I remember, growing up in, or at least I grew up on 10th and Center, and in the early 1960s, the family moved to 4122 North 16th Street, and those areas had alleys and garages, even back then, as far as I can remember. So if the garages had been torn down over time, is it because the city just came in and decided, I want all the garages down in this block and tear them down? I don't think so. I don't think that's the way it went down. So again, who do we blame for that? Who do you blame for that? If you are living in these houses and people like you are living in these houses, how is that all of a sudden somebody else's problem? The other thing is, many tickets that are issued, if it has to do with tickets, night parking tickets or alternate side street parking, you're required to get a permit to park. If you park your car on the street. Now, it's not crazily expensive. I mean, it's an expense. But if you have a car, to tell me that you can't afford a parking ticket, but you can afford to drive a car, is again, I don't think, being quite honest. We spend and we waste a lot of money doing a lot of things. And the fact that you can't spend $15 a month to get a parking permit or whatever it currently is something that I'm really not buying. Yeah, if you're low income, yeah, every little dollar may count. But at the same time, there are people who, because they can't afford a car, are on a bus. What do you say to them? They can't afford what you can afford for a car. And maybe if you can't afford the things that go with a car, maybe you shouldn't have it.
Because part of the expenses that anything, whether you got a hoopty or whether you got
you have maintenance,
$200,000 car,
right?
Part of the expense of the car is, okay, every year you got registration, you got to pay.
Absolutely.
You got to pay for oil changes, you got to pay for tires, you got to pay
Absolutely.
for any other thing that may
Insurance,
go wrong with that car.
name it.
Insurance you're
Yeah.
supposed to have.
Yes.
We can talk about that one later
That's
too.
another whole
But all these things, so those are all expenses that go along with the car. So if you're looking at it and say, hey, I'm planning on buying a car, one of the things you look at, well, I got to buy a parking permit, I got to get registration every year,
All of the above.
got to get insurance, and got to have gas and oil changes. So those things should already be incorporated into the mindset of when you want to own a car. Because a car, when you get a car, I tell my daughter, it's an expense from the day you get it.
Absolutely.
It is just an expense.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I tend to agree with you on that. When people make that argument.
It's just a bogus argument, and it keeps lowering people's both their expectation and their ability to get out of ground zero. You have a lot of people who even complain, about the alternate side parking and the limited side parking between December and March on certain sides of streets in the city of Milwaukee. And that all came about after, 1979. We had a major snowstorm 3 days in a row around January the 13th of 1979. We had 40-something inches of ground cover snow, and some of the streets in the inner city became impossible to even navigate. It was impossible to get emergency vehicles down many of these streets. It was impossible to have bus transportation down some of these streets, and it was due largely to the fact that people wouldn't comply with the rules that were in place. And those rules weren't specific to the inner city. They were that way over the entire city of Milwaukee, that you had to park on alternate sides of the streets depending on the day of the week, except on Saturday evening. And that had been in place regardless. So you can't say that was a racial thing, or it was because we're black or because in the city, because that applied to the entire city of Milwaukee. In any place other than some places on the east side where they did allow, because of the compacted traffic over there, to allow people to park on both sides or however it was. But the bottom line is, you had alternate side parking on 60th and Stevenson, 65th or wherever in Stevenson on the far southwest side, or on Morgan Avenue on the south side. That was universal throughout the city. So the idea that somebody in the inner city would say that was just applying, or was in some kind of way something done against people of color or anything else is just not true. And quite frankly, a lot of those restrictions came because people in this area, or in a certain area, or in a particular geographical area, did not comply with things that ultimately caused those. Yeah. Because it would be very interesting. Some of the same people would be complaining, would be the ones that would complain if the fire engine or the emergency vehicle couldn't get down the street to save your grandmother because you got cars in the way. We'd be the first ones at the table complaining they should do something about this. Well, when something is done, now it's the opposite. Oh, it's done because we're black and it's against us. So I get tired of us buying into that, because everything, obviously, we're still in a very racial society. The clown that's sitting on Pennsylvania Avenue. That's all I'll say with that one. The fact of the matter that the ideologies that he subscribes to and that people now subscribe to and think is okay is evident how bad things still are racially in this nation. However, everything is not about that. I mean, everything is not about that. You don't lead with that first. Sometimes there is a reason that is quite valid for certain things happening that would happen universally, regardless of race, creed, and anything else. And we have to be able to accept that. I'd be the first one to fight something racially. I mean, believe me, anybody know my history, I go at it tooth and nail. But I just get tired of too many times we use that as a reason when there could be valid other reasons that something either is instituted or something is carried out. And so we need to really address that, because we can't get further if we keep wallowing in things that we really can control and do better. Because there's a lot bigger fish to fry, like 1600 on Pennsylvania Avenue.
Yes.
Those are bigger fish to fry than us wallowing in this minuscule little nonsense that we can control, and in many cases is not based on race, creed, or color.
Correct. All right.
Well, I hope you enjoyed part 3. Again, there's a lot of interesting conversation going on, and hopefully, you have some opinions on that. I mean, really everyone should have an opinion on it. But again, I hope you enjoyed. Make sure you like and subscribe and recommend to others. And we'll see you for part 4 coming soon.